Before we begin our journey into history, I want you to pause for a moment and understand something very important. Studying history for school or academic examination is quite different from studying history for the civil services examination. In most school settings, history is presented as a story. History is presented as a story, a sequence of events that students are expected to remember, etc. You may be asked questions such as when something happened, who fought a battle, or what agreement was signed, etc. Naturally, students prepare by memorizing information and facts and timeline and chronological order. However, UPSC does not approach history in this way. UPSC is not interested in whether you can repeat information. It is interested in whether you can understand historical processes, how events unfolded, why societies changed, and what patterns can be observed across time. UPSC is interested in what? UPSC is interested in whether you can understand historical processes, how events unfolded, why societies have been changed, and what patterns can be observed across time. UPSC interested in historical processes, events unfolded, societies changed, and patterns. UPSC interested in these concepts and these patterns. It is not interested in repeat the information again and again and memorizing the facts again and again. So let me illustrate this with a few examples. If you take the revolt of 1857, you must have been heard the revolt of 1857. A school examination may ask you to list out its causes, but UPSC might ask whether it was merely a Sipai mutiny or a broader popular uprising against the British, why it failed despite widespread dissatisfaction against British, or what regional variations existed in participation, etc. These questions demand interpretation. These questions demand interpretation. So, similarly, when studying the Harappan civilization, a, a school question, a school question might ask you, a school question might ask you to list the features of its cities, but UPSC on the other hand might ask what urban planning reveals about administrative capability, what urban planning reveals about administrative capability of Indus Valley people, or what archaeological evidence suggests about social organization. So, when we look at Ashoka, when we look at Ashoka, another example, school learning may focus on describing his policies, but UPSC asks how Dhamma functioned as a tool of governance and what the geographical spread of inscriptions tells us about state reach. In school, describing about his policies, but UPSC asks Dhamma's impact. Dhamma functioned as a tool of governance. And what is the geographical spread of inscriptions? Tell us about state reach. So, the reason is for the difference is very simple. UPSC is selecting administrators, not historians. So, an administrator must be able to understand cause and effect, recognize patterns, interpret incomplete information, and make decisions within the context. When studied correctly, history trains precisely these abilities. These abilities. So, our goal in studying history is not merely to remember the past. Rather, we seek to understand how societies evolve, how power operates, how cultures interact, and how institutions develop over time. In this sense, history becomes a laboratory of governance. In this sense, history becomes a laboratory of governance. When you understand why events happen, memory becomes effortless. But when you try to memorize without understanding, confusion returns again and again. So, understanding is most important in this concept and in this context also. For example, if you grasp why early agriculture developed near rivers because of water availability, fertile soil, and transport, you will never struggle to remember it. So, understanding the concept and context is important. Not only remember and memorization. Many aspirants read history like a storybook. They underline sentences, collect notes, and try to remember details, but they often fail to ask deeper questions like why did this occur? What patterns are visible? And how would UPSC interpret this topic? Without asking such questions, preparations become heavy and stressful. So, at Metis IAS, we will follow a simple but powerful approach. We begin with NCERT, understand the concepts, identify patterns, and then look at them through the UPSC lens. Please remember these words like concepts, understanding the concepts, identify patterns, and then look at them through the UPSC lens. These words are most important in your total entire UPSC preparation. Our effort is always to move from description to understanding. With this mindset in place, let us now begin chapter 1 of the 6th class History, Our Past 1, where we learn how historians reconstruct the past. So, in this context, we will moving ahead to what this chapter really teaches us. This chapter is foundational. It is not primarily about historical facts. It is about what? It is about understanding how knowledge of the past is created. It introduces us to evidence, chronology, and the methods historians use to interpret history. It introduces evidence, chronology, and the methods of historians use to interpret history. If you understand this chapter well, later topics in ancient history will become much clearer. So, in this chapter begins with a simple but profound question raised by Rasheeda. How do we know what happened a long ago? How do we know what happened long ago? This question captures the essence of historical inquiry. This question captures the essence of historical inquiry. Unlike the present, we cannot directly observe the past. We rely on evidences, traces left behind, and use them to reconstruct the events. Reconstruct the events. The chapter explains that knowledge about yesterday comes from direct observation. Knowledge about last year may come from memory, but knowledge about ancient times depends on surviving evidence and reconstruction of evidences and events. This teaches us an important lesson. Historical understanding is limited by what survives. Through historical study, we can learn about what people ate, the clothes they wore, the houses they lived in, their occupations, their beliefs, and their social practices. Through historical study, we can learn about all these issues like people eating patterns, clothes, houses they lived, and construction pattern, and their occupation, their beliefs, their goddesses, their gods, and social practices, etc. This reminds us that history is not only about kings and wars, it is also about everyday life, social structures, and economic activities and religious activities. The chapter then traces early human habitations geographically. It discusses the Narmada Valley, where early hunter gatherers lived. Please go through the map where the Narmada Valley is located after this class. The northwestern regions where agriculture began. The Indus Basin where early cities developed. And later the Ganga Valley where powerful kingdoms emerged. Please remember the pattern and please identify the patterns. Understanding this sequence helps us to see the relationship between geography and historical development. This is important concept for entire history. This is the interrelation between, this is the link between geography and history for development. From Narmada to northwest to Indus, Indus to Ganga. This is the sequence. This is the sequence you have to remember all the time. Why did people move? People moved for many reasons to find livelihoods. Several factors are influenced to people moved, like to find livelihoods, to trade, to escape from disasters, to teach religious ideas, to wage wars, or simply to explore. These are the reasons, these are the several factors are influenced people to move from one place to another. So what are the factors? What are the reasons for people moved from one place to another? In that, exactly what is most important is livelihood, search for livelihood, to find livelihood. And another one is trade, escape from disasters, to teach religious ideas, to wage wars, or simply to explore. Movement also led to cultural exchange. Ideas traveled along with people. While people moving one place to another, they are mingle with each other. They are mingle with another people. So exchange of cultural identity is happened there. So ideas also travel along with the people. So you may reflect that the spread of ideas through movement represents an early form of cultural influences, something we later see in the spread of Buddhism through trade networks in the latter centuries, around 6th century BC. The natural features such as mountains, seas, and deserts helped shape the Indian subcontinent as a distinct geographical region. The idea is important because geography influenced pattern of settlements and cultural interaction. I already told you about geography interacted with and impacted on historical development. So geography is playing always major role in history forming. So the chapter explains how the name India emerged from the river Sindhu, while the term Bharat originates from ancient traditions mentioned in early texts. These names reflect linguistic and cultural evolution from river Sindhu, Indus, Bharat. To understand the past, historians rely on sources such as manuscripts, inscriptions, and archaeological remains. These sources are important for UPSC CSC examination. This is the exam oriented approach. These sources are highly important, and again questions are asking from these sources topic in preliminary as well as mains of the UPSC CSC examination. So please be careful, keep on eye in this topic. So in these three types of sources are there. One is manuscripts, second one is inscriptions, and third one is archaeological remains. So what are the manuscripts? Manuscripts provide written knowledge but are fragile. Inscriptions are durable and often reflect official voices. Archaeological remains, tools, pottery. These are material evidences. Tools, pottery, coins, and buildings reveal aspects of everyday life. Manuscripts and inscriptions are historical evidences, like literature, like writing. Archaeologicals are material evidences, like tools, pottery, coins, and buildings. They will reveal aspects of everyday life. Different sources complement one another. Not everyone left records. Ordinary people's lives are often less documented, which remind us that historical knowledge is incomplete and careful interpretation. Not everyone left records in the past. Ordinary people's lives are often less documented, which reminds us that historical knowledge is incomplete and requires careful interpretation. Historians functions like investigators, examining clues and constructing narratives based on evidence. History is therefore an interpretation grounded in available sources. examining the clues and constructive narratives based on evidence. History is therefore an interpretation grounded in available sources, only available in sources. The chapter emphasizes that the past was not uniform. Different groups experienced history differently, and regional diversity shaped varied social experiences. Regional diversity shaped varied social experiences. So, understanding how time is measured is essential. Systems such as BC, these are backward counting, AD, forward counting, BCE, before Christ, before Common Era, before Christ, Anno Domino, and CE Common Era, help organize historical events chronologically, allowing us to understand sequence and change. So, these dating and chronology is essential to measure understanding the time and identify the time period. Modern scholarship often prefers BCE and CE as neutral terminology. Modern scholars are often prefers BCE and CE as neutral terminology. Scholars decode ancient scripts through careful comparison. Scholars decode ancient scripts through careful comparison, enabling us to read inscriptions and expand historical knowledge is called as decipherment. Broad chronological markers, the beginnings of agriculture, the rise of cities, and the emergence of kingdoms provide a mental structure for understanding ancient history. As far as UPSC is concerned, remember that history is not just about the rulers. Sources may be incomplete and chronology must be interpreted carefully. So, in simple words, history is not about just kings and wars. Archaeology is not only monuments, chronology is the matters. Sources must be interpreted. So, in this chapter, develops evidence based thinking, chronological awareness, and analytical skills, foundations for deeper historical study. This chapter develops as what? Evidence thinking, chronological clarity, and analytical mindset for deeper historical study. Ultimately, history is not about memorizing facts, it is about understanding how knowledge is constructed and recognizing the limitations of evidence. This awareness encourages intellectual humility, a quality essential for thoughtful decision making. Ultimately, history is not about what? History is not about memorizing facts. It is about understanding how knowledge is constructed and recognize the limitations of evidence. The awareness encourages intellectual humility, a quality essential for thoughtful decision making. It is not about memorizing factors. Orientation, connection, and application. These principles will guide us as we continue our journey through history. Thank you.